Chapter 5. Tacky. Another evening, another double date, and Alice and I had recently been out to stock up on all kinds of religio-mystical trinkets and items and gadgets, stuff we like to have on hand. We'd either shop upmarket at the gift store in the National Cathedral, where we'd take our dogs, who'd still have nothing whatsoever to do with one another, to the blessing of the animals, or we'd drive across town to the basements of strange and clammy medieval-seeming churches tucked away in the more obscure parts of Northeast, the kinds of places that only Alice knows about, there to buy our stacks of plasticized prayer cards and our virgin candles, and prophylactic against this or that specific calamity in which each of us both did and did not believe in almost exact proportion. And we'd bought medals to particular saints who might be persuaded to intercede on behalf of one or another of our children who is currently having this or that snag or conundrum. And on this particular evening in this particular Vietnamese restaurant, Alice and I were each wearing our new old charm bracelets, which clanged and banged very satisfyingly against the tabletop of Little Saigon in Cleveland Park, where the four of us had just ordered enough food for a fleeing army, including that entire crispy fish that served with its dead fried eye just very boldly looking at you, which doesn't matter because it's so totally delicious. And come to think of it, this may in fact have been the same night the four of us then went across the street to the uptown to sleep through Kinsey, which, if you haven't heard much about it, seems like it might be kind of hot, but turns out to be the most incredibly tedious saga of the great American sex researcher Alfred Kinsey, who started off with the humble mission of studying the reproductive habits of slime mold or fruit flies, and then went off on this other tack, resulting in one of the longest and dullest movies ever known to mankind, whose tagline should have been, "Watch, paint, dry." So Alice and I are sitting there being pretty proud of going out with our husbands and the success of this kind of couples friendship, where your friend likes your husband, who likes your friend, who also likes her husband, and so forth, which is actually statistically rare. And I was also being very proud of my charm bracelet, though I did have the feeling that Alice's was slightly better than mine, at least more tasteful, say, since she and Eric had found hers together at the Georgetown flea market. And Eric generally has good, if flamboyant taste, better taste than mine. But then my own charm bracelet had probably started off being okay too, but then I needed to elaborate by adding a bunch of extra magical shit to it to augment and amend, by putting on all these saints' faces and other potent charms, meaning secret things, to hex and de-hex, as this was during one of those particular rough patches of mine when I had, for some reason unknown to anyone, decided it would be a good idea to go live by myself in the country in the company of one sick dog to write a book that was sure to defeat me. And I remember being so happy that evening, so singularly proud, not only of my charm bracelet, but the surprise of being at this point in my life and finding myself to be someone not only in possession of a charm bracelet, but also the kind of friend who would have one too, and would even wear it out when she came out with you, when Brian suddenly points to mine as it clanks and bangs and says, "That's pretty tacky." "Tacky?" I said, and I was somewhat confused. My charm bracelet was being pronounced tacky by someone who wore, until he lost it, the tie Jack and I once literally found in a gutter and brought home and had it dry cleaned and elaborately gift-wrapped for another of Brian's rather important birthdays, in that this actually was a very nice tie that so obviously needed to belong to Brian for a little while before he left it behind on a wire hanger in a hotel somewhere halfway across the country, knowing that only Brian would understand a gift like this and its particular karmic joke. Tacky, I thought, and I was slightly stung before I began to remember my objects of personal apparel were being judged by someone who was as likely to have a bobblehead of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar show up in the creche on Christmas morning as an adorable statuette of the sweet baby Jesus. "You find my charm bracelet tacky?" I said, with about as much dignity as I could muster. "That's right," Brian said. Then he went back to doing what he was doing, which was going ahead to organize his look. He was, that season, wearing this really rumpled overcoat that was oversized since he'd lost a lot of weight eating nothing but tuna, and this coat thing was as shapeless as what we used to call a muumuu, but was made of some kind of black and white synthetic tweedish fabric, but thick, and so he was trying to pat it and shape it all around himself, trying to get into it as if he was trying to get all this fabric to come to order, and then was cinching himself into it by tying the now too large belt around his waist like an old woman would who was bundling herself up in her bathrobe to hobble to the door as she was yelling, "Hold your horses, I'm coming. Give me a goddamn minute."